Russian forces now control most of Severodonetsk, the focus of the battle for Ukraine's eastern Donbas region, though Ukrainian lines to the city still seem to be active. While the fighting is fierce and Russian progress is slow, the Kremlin is making some headway. It's evident that Russian forces are no longer in retreat and have also managed to entrench themselves in several strong defensive positions from which they'll be hard to dislodge. A senior Ukrainian presidential aide, Mykhaylo Podolyak, has recently told the BBC that between 100 and 200 Ukrainian troops are being killed on the front line every day. It's clear that in the last 2 weeks, things have been difficult for Ukraine. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes why the Russian force is gaining momentum after a dismal beginning in Ukraine. Let's get started. This video is sponsored by NordVPN. NordVPN is a premium VPN service available for macOS, iOS, Windows, and Android with more than 5,400 servers in 60 countries. But why use a VPN or virtual private network? VPN is an encrypted tunnel. A VPN can protect your privacy, which is threatened by many factors like data logging by internet service providers. It can also help you access contents which are blocked based on geolocation. Why NordVPN? Its servers are fast and has zero log policy. Not only this, NordVPN has taken one step further and recently introduced a new feature, threat protection. Threat protection prevents malware from getting on users' devices and blocks trackers, intrusive and malicious ads, and harmful websites. Use the link in the description to get up to 71% off the 2-year plan plus threat protection for no extra cost. At the checkout, use the code DEFENSE to get an extra month for free. Russian trouble started when they totally misread the situation on several counts. The Kremlin thought that it would be a cakewalk. When it comes to intelligence assessment, they underestimated the strength of Ukraine's armed forces, and they also failed to gauge the willingness of civilians to resist the Russian forces. Russian military also faced lots of logistic issues which blunted their initial push. Not only this, there was a lack of coordination between the Russian Air Force and ground troop formations. From several footage, it can be well understood that Russian columns of troops moved forward beyond the reach of their own air defense cover, which exposed them to attacks. As days passed, Russian strategists addressed some of these challenges. While the situation remains far from ideal, many aspects have been streamlined. In the beginning, the fighting was concentrated in the urban setup. Ukrainian forces used ATGMs and manpads to great effect, and this resulted in a heavy toll on the Russians. But the situation shifted when the fighting moved to the Donbas region. As noted by U.S. Press Secretary for the United States Department of Defense, John Kirby, earlier, the land there is flat, rolling plains, and conducive to using long-range fires. He said, "The terrain lends itself to the use of artillery, and we know that the Russians also believe the same thing because we're seeing them move artillery units into the Donbas as well." The balance of power is heavily tilted in favor of the Russian forces due to this, as they have much more assets available to conduct long-range strikes. The hit-and-run ambushes that Ukraine has been using in cities with short-range weapons are not suitable in open landscape. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that fighting in the country's eastern Donbas region has become one of the most brutal battles in European history. The battles in Donbas will surely go down in military history as one of the most brutal battles in Europe and for Europe, he said. The price of this battle is very high. In this channel itself, lots of weapons received by Ukraine have been discussed. Several kinds of heavy weaponry have trickled in. For example, Ukraine has got different kinds of artillery, including Slovak Zuzana II, American M777, French Caesar, German PZH-2000, and Polish Krab, to name a few. It's also received MLRS, or Multiple Launch Rocket System, like the RM-70 and American M142 HIMARS. But the quantity is limited and deliveries are delayed. For reference, the U.S. is sending only 4 HIMARS systems in the first lot. Germany, Europe's largest economy, has dragged its feet on weapons transfers. French President Emmanuel Macron, who heads Europe's second-largest economy, recently voiced not to humiliate Russia, while also supporting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's position on recovering occupied territories. These clearly indicate the two nations that could have done a lot have been reluctant. Israel has not transferred weapons, even after repeated calls from President Zelensky, and has even warned 3 Baltic nations against sending Israeli-origin platforms to Ukraine. Viewers may note that Israel puts strict end-user regulations on weapons sold abroad, which legally restrict the ability of the buying nation to send the equipment to a third-party nation without permission from the original producer. Ukraine is a large country, and hence Ukrainian forces need quality as well as quantity when it comes to weapons. As reported by BBC, Ukrainian presidential aide Mykhaylo Podolyak repeated Ukraine's appeal for more weapons from the West, saying that the complete lack of parity between the Russian and Ukrainian armies was the reason for Ukraine's heavy casualty rate. He said, "Our demands for artillery are not just some kind of whim, but an objective need when it comes to the situation on the battlefield," adding that Ukraine needs 150 to 300 rocket launch systems to match Russia, a much higher number than it's received so far. While ATGMs and manpads require limited training, heavy weapon systems like M777, M142 HIMARS, etc. have longer training durations. Viewers may note that Ukraine's arsenal was mostly made of Soviet-era systems, and this is a significant shift for them. Ukrainian personnel have been managing well, but they're human and will need time. Another aspect is that heavy weapons are much harder to transport and also much more vulnerable during this time, since they can be much more easily identified. Russia has been actively targeting Western supplies and trying to neutralize them before they reach the front line. On some occasions, they've been successful. On the 12th of June, Russia announced its forces used Caliber cruise missiles to destroy a large depot with U.S. and European weapons in Ukraine's Chernobyl region. So it's not easy for Ukraine to receive the heavy weapons and make proper use of them, as it's already in an active military conflict against a far larger force. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting, and kindly provide your feedback in the comment section. This will help us improve.